Well, I'm glad you brought up boot camp. A lot of the questions, a lot of the commentary we've gotten so far, and I'm sure you've heard some of the stories. Let's talk about your injury first, and then we'll move into your bag of goodies.
Okay, cool.
How did you get injured? It was your knee, right?
Yeah. I trained for about 4 months before boot camp, and I dropped like 25 or 30 pounds. I was in the best shape of my life, actually, because I knew I wanted to be going into it, and I felt like Sobel had to be an example for the men. Supposedly he could run just as well, and his time was very good up the hill and back. So I wanted to, be in good shape. But I realized when I got to boot camp that the way I had trained was fairly, cushy. I mean, a lot of my running was in real good running shoes, and I was on a treadmill or, I was on softer ground. But the fact is, when boot camp started, we had none of our personal possessions. So we didn't have jogging shoes. They just gave us brand new, authentic or reproduction boots, which were incredibly hard leather. And these guys, it's amazing that this is what they trained in, because we were up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and there was often no stretching, and it was often freezing cold, and we would train running in these on cement or on hard ground, in these boots that were not broken in. So after 2 weeks of that, of running miles that early in the morning with no stretching and the freezing cold and those shoes, something gave away. A ligament in one of my knees blew. And it was incredibly painful. And because we're actors, I have to pretend, in a week to actually. I can't pretend. I have to actually run up a hill. So all those scenes with me running with those guys, I was just in excruciating pain. All they could do really is wrap me. We had to, go to see a doctor and see what I could do, but there was nothing they could do. I just had to wrap my leg.
From what I understand, there was a kind of an issue with injuries before you got hurt, and they were threatening to shut down the boot camp, and so you really bit the bullet and didn't tell anybody for like days that you had hurt your knee.
I tried to. Look, I had a lot of pride, and I was literally, I had a good 15 years or more on most of the actors there. So, and I thought I was in really good shape, and I was actually, but I tried to push through it, but I was like, I'm not going to be able to walk, let alone run when I'm supposed to on camera in 4 days if I don't get some help. It took that actually after we finished shooting. It still took a good year to heal. It was a pretty bad injury, and a lot of guys were hurt in that. And I think it's a combination of guys really wanting to throw themselves into this, really enthusiasm more than anything, and the conditions were pretty brutal in terms of the terrain. You'd throw yourself into something and not realize that you just threw yourself into a rock, and a lot of people broke bones and got cut up pretty bad. But
yeah, I saw Ron Livingston's video where Doc Rowe was trying to sew together Neil McDonough's face. Shane was, it's like, I'm an actor, I'm not a doctor. I really don't do this. And then, of course, the very next scene is Neil, he walking by going and saying, I'm Buck Compton, baby.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I'm Buck Compton, baby. So let me ask you this. After you were seen by the official doctors, the real doctors, the MDs, on your way back to camp, apparently you made a stop.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just thought, everyone was on lockdown, and I just thought, it'd be really just the right thing to do. Even though I was, isolating myself from these guys, I thought, look, I'm an actor. These guys are jonesing for some other goods. I just thought it would be a laugh to bring them back a bunch of, forbidden kind of candy and some magazines that they'd enjoy.
Well, and yeah, as Jenna said, this has become an epic part of the boot camp stories.
It's one of the stories that really, it comes up almost every time.
Yeah, almost every single
really?
time. Yeah.
Yeah, the contraband. Well, I just thought, I got out. It was like everyone was in jail for a couple of weeks, and I got out. I couldn't not come back with something for the guys.
I just received a Skype text message from one of your boys. Popeye says, "What's up, and how are you doing?"
What's up? I'm doing great. Where is he?
He's actually in L.A. right now.
Excellent.
So, gotcha.
Oh, good.
So let's the bag of goodies. Now, before we get past the bag of goodies, did you know about Neil McDonough's canteen full of booze?
No, I had no idea.
He snuck in this liquor that he wasn't supposed to have, and then after his boys did well, he shared with them.
Right, and he snuck it in through his canteen.
Yeah, he poured a whole fifth into his canteen.
Nice.
And he actually called back in when we were talking to Dale Dye and said, "Hey, Captain, I got to tell you, the reason I didn't have anything to drink for the first 3 days is because my canteen was filled with booze."
Yeah. But hey, while we're talking about the tension between Sobel and his men and his as you put it, like his routine, the way he gets to the guys is not being their friend, but being their leader. A couple of people from the chat room wanted to know, because the question had come up more than once. We asked them to send anything that they want to know, but I think the biggest question is how, if any, how did the tension between the characters, how did that translate off camera?
I don't know. I mean, I really isolated myself from the guys. I'm sure that they would talk shit about me. And it was easy for me and actually helpful for me to imagine they were either talking shit about me as the character or as an actor.
Oh, yeah.
The guy from Friends, thinking he can do this shit. So that was, it was easy. That fed my character and fueled, what I was doing. So I think it was mutual between it was mutually beneficial for us to not really get along. Now, that's not to say we weren't respectful. I think everyone was respectful to each other as actors, but there was nothing, no bad blood in any way. But I think, they kept their distance from me, and I kept my distance from them.
That's good.
Except for Simon. Simon obviously was my right-hand man, Simon Pegg. So, he and I, became friends and have remained friends since then. And
So let me ask you this then. Since you were isolated, how long were you actually on set filming? Because I know a lot of the guys, this was like a 1.5-year process. You were in the 3 episodes. Did you call it quits, or did you stick around, or did you what did you go, or what did you do when you were done? And if you were isolated from the guys, how did you spend your days?
Well, it was a lot of work. It was quite a lot of work, and when we were filming, there were long days and often fairly brutal, just physically brutal. And I would just isolate myself. I'd go back to the text. I'd go back to my research and work on my stuff. And I don't know. I don't remember doing much else really. It was, in a way, it was good to be so isolated where we were shooting. I had no distractions. In a way, I tried to cut myself off from the real world and from my own, my other life, really.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, we've talked about this character before and how difficult it must be to play that character because, you have to be aware of, we'll call it the tension. You have to be aware of it immediately.
Oh, yeah.
And it has to hit home, right? Otherwise, it'll fall apart later in the series. And so the way you played it, I thought was completely amazing because I think an actor is as good as his range, and you've really pegged the range there. And then throwing yourself into the character like that and isolating yourself when it's so easy to just go on and have a good time with all those boys.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think everyone did that. I felt, as I mentioned before, I felt great responsibility to humanize him and because he's a real person, and I feel like his life story, I felt, was quite tragic, and really moving to me, and I wanted him to be, yes, of course he was a bastard, and what he did, at times was ruthless and even cruel, but I wanted him to be sympathetic as well, because I when I read about him and I read the book, I actually felt for him. And there's something that a lot of veterans speak about, which is that this moment in time, and this is true even today of today's young veterans, and guys who are serving, that this moment in time is such a life-changing and bonding and formative moment that for some people it is the highlight of their entire lives. It's the moment that they had the most meaning, or they felt the most their lives had the most meaning. And so when they come back to reality, like Herbert did, he actually, I'm sure you know, but he jumped at Normandy and survived. And then he came back to Chicago. He became an accountant. And then he was called again, and he served in the Korean War.
Yeah.
And then he came back to Chicago again and married and had 2 kids. But when I thought about it, I was like, well, I bet the highlight of his entire life was Easy Company and what he created. How do you top that after, that experience and that kind of sense of purpose and a sense of pride, and then 20 years later he tried to, or several years later, many years later, he tried to kill himself. And failed at that. Failed, by the way. He failed at even killing himself.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was tragic. And died alone in a hospital. He died of malnutrition, and no services were held for him. I mean, that, to me, was just like, brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal
absolutely.
Story.
Yeah, it really shocked me and Jenna when we read that. We were like, oh, my God. I mean, this guy created one of the best fighting forces our planet had ever seen, and trained them to be the best in the entire military, and died hungry and alone in a hospital, blind, after a failed suicide attempt.
Yeah.
And it's just Shakespearean.
Yeah, it's tragic. You're right. I mean, it's and so I felt a real responsibility to try. Really, I appear in 2 other episodes. I think it's 4 and 10 in like a brief scene in each. But it's really one episode that Sobel is in, and I really wanted as much as I could to try to create a real person who was sympathetic. But
well, and I think one of my favorite scenes was when you came and snaked Malarkey's motorcycle.
Oh, yeah.
And it just was like a little reminder of, I trained you, I made you what you are today,
right.
and you still can't get away from the grasp of being the proper soldier that I want and demand, and twist that little knife a little bit. And I'm like, God, you played the character so good. By the end of that scene, I wanted to hit you, and I know. Well,
no one knows. No one knows. I don't know if he's this mad genius or if he's just really narcissistic and I mean, we don't know. I thought about trying to get in touch with his family, but I don't know. I felt that I think I didn't want to be unduly influenced or pressured to do, to go in one direction, So I was amazed when I saw the whole thing. I was just blown away by everyone, the entire company. I just thought it was fantastic because I didn't get to see all those, I wasn't present for so much of that, and then to to see them all do their stuff and to see each of them have so many wonderful moments, and it's really great casting, great work by everyone.
Yeah, everything is put together so well because, I mean, like, there's just, like, a line and you fall in love with the character immediately.
Right.
It's like, boom, all right, you got me. I'm yours.
Well, now, going back to the contraband story here, Dexter Fletcher apparently used the M&Ms you brought back as poker chips.
I do remember playing. I do remember playing some poker. I mean, I love some cards. So that's probably the only time I actually socialized with the guys.
So somebody would scream poker game, and you were first at the table shuffling.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
No, I mean, I remember playing a couple of times, but again, except for that isolated incident of returning with all the goodies for everyone, I really tried to keep to myself.